Hello there, it's Yuri Goman, and today we're having a discussion about the Chat GPT and AI and how could it help you with your daily tasks as business analysts. If you tried using Chat GPT in your daily tasks, you probably noticed that the results are far from ideal. From my experience and research I did among fellow business analysts, the time to adjust the output doesn't compensate for the effort to educate the model. On top of that, there are business constraints for using ChatGPT in your work. You would rarely find a company that is ready to share its client information and project information and let a third-party AI solution to learn based on it. Because of that, requirements generated by AI can serve only as a starting point maybe, but no more than that. That's why I believe that the time to use AI for requirements modeling will come later. And yet, there are things you could start doing right now to increase the quality of life as a business analyst. So, I've spent a year trying out the ChatGPT and comparing its versions, including the big release of GPT for Omni and even GPT for Omni Mini that just came out last week. First, I tried writing some user stories, generating non-functional requirements, making checklists. I was focusing on modeling requirements, in other words. What I realized quickly was that without the proper context, I received quite a sporadic results. Not having an opportunity to put all the requirements, all the BRDs, client communication, and anything else from business analysis information, I was doomed to fail. Thus, I started looking for something that I could do in an atomic way, something that didn't require all the project information and connections between them. As a result, I found 5 reusable ways to effectively work with AI without violating your NDA, and I will share those ways with you today in this video. And of course, I will share the prompts I used for ChatGPT to perform these tasks. Find them in the pinned comment below. By the way, if you have your own story about AI helping with your daily task as a business analyst, don't be shy and jump into comments to share them with us. Let's start from number 5, and this way of using AI should be quite obvious for you. Sometimes you need to come up with some ideas, but you just have a mind block or analysis paralysis. Like what kind of statistics and KPIs you could implement for your system, for example, or what kind of personal information you want to collect from your users. In other words, you can use ChatGPT to brainstorm options when you have an issue by doing it yourself or with the help of your peers. Yes, large language models are limited by the data they were trained on, yet they have much more data in their storage than any person could memorize. Also, they don't have mind blocks as a thing, and they can generate and display responses in just a couple of seconds. As brainstorming has a low entry barrier and expect a lot of ideas to be filtered out with just a few left, ChatGPT actually helps with creating lots of options to go through. It is super easy and doesn't require specific information, as you can throw in even abstract things and it will work. Next is number 4. As business analysts, we have a lot of written communication. We write emails, we respond to Jira tickets, we discuss issues in Slack or Teams, and use other ways to convey information in writing. I don't know how you feel about it, but I actually hate how much time it takes sometimes to put your thoughts on paper in a way that another person understands. Or when I sit in analysis paralysis trying to find out the right words to communicate with difficult clients, or not understanding what the heck did they mean. This is where the ChatGPT proved its worth to me by helping with all sorts of correspondence. For example, during the communication with one of my clients from UK, I failed to understand some of the jokes and figure of speech they made. Before, in such situations, I had to search on the internet for some time before I probably understood the modern language they used. I mean, you cannot seem unprofessional and ask the client, right? Because people expect you to know the language. But even after searching on the internet, I had difficulties to answer properly. Sense of humor, even in my own culture, sometimes eludes me, and this was completely another culture. ChatGPT became a huge friend to me here. I cleaned up the text of personal information, I've set up a context, and I shot the question. ChatGPT actually described the meaning as a result and possible intent of a joke. On top of that, ChatGPT actually suggested how to respond. I analyzed options, used one of them, and it worked. The client loved the answer. We had some further giggles, and it felt like we connected, as since then we started communicating more than any other people in the project. So that was one of my personal experiences that I loved, and there were many of them. ChatGPT has been helpful in a ton of cases for written communication since then for me. It provided me with ideas and inspiration for some letters, it helped me create email templates, it made some more jokes for me and was useful with other things. It even helped me to fix my tone of voice in the email, but that is something I will talk about later in this video. Going to number 3 in my chart. Here things become more specific to business analysis. In my career, I have worked with a lot of discoveries and pre-sales activities. In other words, I had quite some time when I worked with a project from a new domain, niche, or technology. Obviously, a single person can't have all the knowledge of the universe in their head, so every time to work on a new request, I had to spend a couple of hours searching for the information about the client, about the domain, about competitors, possible laws and regulations, and basically any kind of market research information that would help me to understand the client. Needless to say, what ChatGPT did here for me. Today, with a couple of prompts, I can get a company summary in just a few seconds. Business segments, key markets, competitors, and other information. In a nutshell, in terms of clients, it helps a lot with your due diligence. Another case is the business domain. Let's say my client is from the fintech field and they want to make a new mobile bank. As a person who rarely works in fintech, I would like to know what is fintech in general, what are the key aspects of fintech, and what is mobile banking. So what I will do, I'll just shoot those questions into Chat GPT. Based on responses, I will identify my knowledge gaps and ask ChatGPT to provide me with a learning plan to learn key aspects of my gaps within a day's time span. Surely, I will need to validate the plan with a common sense at least, or with some colleague who knows the domain. Yet still, AI helps by sharing basics with light speed and allows me to learn further if required. Besides this example, ChatGPT helped me with benchmarking, competitor analysis, market research, and other things. In a nutshell, ChatGPT and any AI generative tool is a great tool to learn profession-specific things, both when you don't know where to start and to deepen your knowledge. So, we've got to number 2 with another one on deck. Actually, this one is highly connected to previous one. Let's say you've learned the basics about the fintech, neobanking, and mobile banking. Now, you need to prepare for an interview with your client. With a simple prompt, you can ask ChatGPT to generate a set of questions to clarify a business idea, target audience, unique features, etc. On top of generating the agenda and scope of elicitation, you can also prepare for talking to a specific person. If you know the contact person's name, you can ask ChatGPT to search all over the internet for you and gather information about the person from public resources. With that, you can ask ChatGPT to assume what kind of approach would be the best for this person, what are their traits based on what they post on the internet, if anything, and what hooks you can use to connect with them. In other words, you can delegate your due diligence to the tool and analyze the data afterward. Okay, now we have approached the top 1 use case from my experience. Sometimes, as a business analyst, I face complicated situations and people, and you know that sometimes when you discuss complicated things, you say one thing, another person says another things, and all of a sudden another person is offended without such intent. Being quite a blunt person by nature, I often use cases when I struggle to provide less straightforward answers or reactions, still conveying the dissatisfaction and the request to another person to fix things. When it comes to people I know well, it may end fine, even if I cross the line. But with stakeholders, and specifically from the client side, or people I don't know well, it may become actually ugly. This is where ChatGPT helped me become a better person in terms of business analysis. Not only it worked great for me as a teacher in general, but it also works great with retrospecting my past experience and on the go with the written communication. Let me share a couple of cases here from my experience. Okay, and the first case is about my communication with a stakeholder who eluded me for some time. I was trying to catch them and have a conversation about a thing that was super important for a project to move forward. We were going back and forth about this meeting, agenda, scope of discussion, and so on. At some point, I sent them email with a document containing all the things we agreed to discuss and received an answer that made me absolutely furious. Not only did they trash my document by form, not touching the content, the essence of the document, but they also insisted on postponing the meeting for another month because they wanted to go on vacation and they didn't want to do any excessive stuff for the time. This reply made me so frustrated that I had to go for an hour-long walk before I could even sit and analyze the reply properly. Obviously, I failed somewhere in stakeholder engagement, and I found out that exactly later. But at the moment, I needed to fix the situation quickly. I've sat for a couple of hours frozen, trying to reply without making things worse, but couldn't come up with anything. Then I remembered about the Chat GPT. I've set the contents of the conversation, of the situation, and I just described it and asked AI to compose a strong-worded email, make it firm but respectful, and avoid personal attacks or insulting language. I also added the goal of making the stakeholder make some time for me because of urgency. The first version seems a bit harsh to me, so I asked ChatGPT to make it softer, and the second version was much better. I added some project specifics manually, as I couldn't put it initially into the tool, and sent an email. Almost right away, I received a booking in my calendar from that stakeholder, and it looked like actual Christmas to me. I put my emotions aside, and we had a quite productive discussion as if nothing happened. As a side note, we actually sit and cleared my expectations from the person, as they felt the tension and brought that topic themselves. The second story is about me communicating with my peers. I was known for a long time as a person who gave the biggest amount of comments during the requirements testing. Being detail-oriented, I used to point out even the smallest mistakes, not leaving anything out of sight. While I provided the great feedback in terms of content, the forum was not ideal. Just imagine getting a list of 120 improvements for your document and a straightforward feedback on top. Ouch! While personally I feel neutral when I get something like this myself, I found out the hard way that other people rather do not enjoy such things. It worked for many years like this before the Chat GPT 3.5. At some point, I decided to try and put my feedback before sending it into ChatGPT. So what I did, I removed all personal information from that feedback, I made it NDA compliant, and I put it into the ChatGPT. I asked it to analyze how another person would perceive the message and what could I change to make it softer and more pleasing. And it worked. Not only AI explained me what was wrong in a way that became clear, but it also suggested a couple of options to make the feedback better. So I used those suggestions, I posted the updated feedback, and the miracle happened. For the first time in years, the person was actually happy with what they learned from me and even mentioned it to me in person later, because that's the person I knew for some time. These are all the stories I wanted to share with you today. From what you may see, my positive experience with AI lies in the domain of communication and research. The same goes for many peers I had an AI discussion with. This raises a question. Why do these things work best for business analysts at the moment? Well, my assumption is that communication relies on common, accessible, and wide people's knowledge, which was pretty much the same for centuries. For research, it is obvious that the computing speed of AI is massively greater than any human brain, and with recent access to the internet, it has become the ultimate search engine. At the same time, requirements for specific solutions to specific initiatives are always tailored and unique. Surely, you can find a lot of patterns and templates to reuse from the generalized ChatGPT responses, but in most cases you will need to modify them substantially to meet your stakeholder needs, which is less efficient than creating them from scratch. Thus, unless we start feeding AI with massive amount of project data, we will be limited in our AI usage as business analysts. Of course, I hope that in future we will be able to model requirements at ease with AI. But for now, we are limited with written communication and maybe some analysis, maybe some research. Other things are in future, per my opinion. But who knows, maybe that future is not that far.